Now, we all want life to be as easy as possible. I don't think anybody just sits around thinking, boy, I wish life was a little tougher than it is. At least for me, I kind of feel like, I think we're kind of selfish that way. Well, I mean, I hate it that your life's tough, but I really want my life to turn out really easy. It's kind of the way we think. And there was a shipwreck in a terrible storm, obviously out on the ocean. And only 3 men actually survived the shipwreck and made it to a nearby island. And they didn't really know each other. They'd never met each other. They didn't really know each other on the ship. But they survived through many hardships. And over the process of surviving these hardships on this island all along, they actually became very good friends. And one day they found a cave on this island. And in the cave they found this bottle. And in this bottle there was a genie. So you know this is a true story. So they found this genie, and the genie obviously popped out as they opened it, and the genie said, I'm the genie that was stuck in this bottle for hundreds of years, and so for releasing me, I'll grant each one of you just one wish. There'll be 3 wishes, just one apiece. So the first guy said, well, I want to go back to my wife and children. And instantly, at that moment, he was teleported right back home to his wife and his children. And the second guy said, well, I want to go back to my family and friends as well. And instantly, he was teleported back to his family and friends. The third guy said, I don't really have anyone back home, so I really would like my friends back. We all want what we want. And we want it as easy as possible for us. We love jokes, but we often don't learn from them. Have you noticed? We don't learn from them. There were people that went to visit a wise man, and they were complaining about the same problems over and over and over. Now, you've probably never complained about the same problem more than once. But these people who went to this wise man wanting to know how to solve them just complained over and over. This went on for days. Finally, the wise man one day said, I don't want all of you to listen to me. And so he proceeded to tell them all a joke. And it was a really good joke. I'm not telling the joke right now, but it's a really good joke. It was right here, but I'm not going to. No, it's not in my notes. So it's this really good joke. And they all roared with laughter. It was just so funny. And they, after that calmed down, a few minutes passed, and so the wise man, all of a sudden, starts telling the same joke again. Well, at this time, everybody kind of smiled, but nobody laughed uproariously. That didn't happen. They just kind of smiled, and they went, that was kind of weird. And so he sat there for a few minutes, and a few minutes later, he tells the same joke for the 3rd time. And he noticed that no one laughed and no one even smiled again. And he sat there for a minute, and then he looked at him and he says, you can't laugh at the same joke over and over. So why is it that you're always crying about the same problems over and over? Maybe we don't learn like we think. The paths that we take are often difficult. We don't intend for them to be. Paul had prayed based upon the text we read a moment ago to go to Rome. He really wanted to go to Rome. Okay? I've been there. I don't know why he wanted to go so bad. But it's not that great. So in Acts 21 through 27, though, Paul began to go to Rome. And it began in Acts chapter 21. And he finally got there by 28. But the story that I'm going to focus on is 27 and 28. And Paul's trial, which was over something that was trumped up. It wasn't true. He didn't do anything that they accused him of. He did not have Gentiles in the temple. That's what they accused him of. He had other men that he paid for their part to, like he had done. He'd cut his hair and he was offering his hair as a sacrifice after it had grown up. That's that he had taken a Nazirite vow. That's in the rest of the scriptures. We won't get into that. But because they had accused him of this, they were trying to kill Paul because he had been a zealot and now he's leaving the zealot cause, and they couldn't allow that. And so to prevent them from killing him, because they didn't care what the rule was, they wanted to get him, he appealed as a citizen of Rome. He appealed to Caesar, which was his right as a true Roman citizen. Now he's a Jew, but he'd been born in a free city, so that made him a Roman citizen automatically. And so that allowed him to go to Rome, but he had to go to Rome under guard in that situation among soldiers. And yet he was going to Rome. But it wasn't the trip he had in mind when he penned Romans chapter 1, verses 8 through 15. It wasn't the trip he had in mind when he had prayed, "Oh Lord, let me go do this." You need to remember that when you're praying for what you want. You may get what you want, but the path to it might not be exactly what you have in mind. Okay? That's just something to remember, flying over this territory. We must learn to trust God, though, even when that occurs, even when the trip becomes harsh, even when the journey is harsh. We don't want to take those harsh journeys, but we still need to learn from them. Let me show you something here. I don't know if you can see any of that. Wise people try to plan their steps, but you want to avoid trouble. But to do that, you need the Lord's help, because the Scripture is very clear. Proverbs 3 and verse 6, He shall direct your paths. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your steps, or make your path straight. Proverbs 4 and verse 26, He ponders the path of your feet. That's the Lord. The Lord ponders the steps, the path of your feet. That's pretty particular, isn't it? Proverbs 5 verse 21 says, He ponders all of His paths, everything that a man does. And then Proverbs 16 verse 9, the Lord directs His steps. That's talking about you. He directs the steps you take. I think you want the Lord a part of that, but it doesn't always go the way you want. In Job chapter 3 and verse 26, Job says, I really wasn't at rest. I wasn't really living the life of Riley without any trouble. And then it says, yet trouble came. So he already had problems. Everybody reads the book of Job as if you'd never had any problems. But he had the same kind of problems you got. But you've never faced what Job faced. There's not a person in here that's ever faced what Job faced. And if you think you have, be careful. You might get it. Yeah. So you haven't faced that. So he had trouble. So you think you have trouble. He had troubles already. Yet trouble came. Now, what I'm trying to say is, in Acts chapter 9 and verse 16, the Lord had said about Paul to Ananias, I will show him how many things he must suffer for my name's sake. Woo, what a thing to have said over you. There's some trouble coming your way, Paul. I haven't forgotten you put my people in prison. You're forgiven, but maybe you need to learn. I haven't forgotten what you did. You need to learn. Sometimes we think because we're forgiven that it's all forgotten and that there's nothing that might come our way because of it. It doesn't really work like that. So I want to give you 3 times that Paul trusted God through his hard journeys that are really important for us to pay attention to, okay? Can I do that? Number 1, imagine that. I'm so thrilled that the Lord cooperated. Well, apparently He's not cooperating with me now. I can't even say the word cooperate. Cooperated with me to prepare tonight so that you would have a storm. Isn't that neat? Had no plans of my own about that, but we need to trust God through the storms. In Acts 27, I'll just tell you what happened, verses 13 through 38. He's already on his way to Rome. They've already entered a ship. They've gotten over to Cyprus. And now there was a big discussion about whether or not they should stay in this little bitty place or they should go on. The reason was there was 276 people on this boat. 276 people on a wooden boat. If that doesn't give you enough scare, I'm just like, okay, that ought to sink the boat right there. 276 people on a wooden boat, right? So they had some big wooden boats back then. But they push on because the place that they wanted to stay, maybe to get out of the weather because it's about to be winter time and it's about to be the time of the terrible northern storms, basically the Euroclydons, that's Euroclydon. that would come, the wind that would come from Europe area. So that's what they were afraid of. And sure enough, they pushed on anyway. They got just past Cyprus, and then it struck. The ship was hit so hard with such mighty winds that they took the riggings down and they threw them underneath the boat, tying the boat together because they just knew the boat was going to come apart. And so they tied it together for 14 days. They did not see the sun and they did not see the stars. It was pitch dark at night and it was dark in the day, and nothing but wind and howling wind. And remember, this is winter time. This is cold. It's bitter out there on the ship, and that's where they are for 14 straight days. Finally, they began to realize they were going to sink. They're not going to make it. So they began, all the cargo worth to them tens and hundreds of $1,000s on our level, right? They began to throw it over the side. Why? Because they're starting to sink. They're taking on more water at this point. All that little stuff in those grooves between the boards won't hold out forever when it gets that rough on the ocean. So they begin to throw everything overboard. They lose it all. The entire bit of what's going to keep this ship up, they had to get rid of it so it would float the best possible. And about the 14th day, the night before that, Paul gets a visit by an angel. And that angel tells him that, don't worry, Paul, it's going to be okay. You're not going to die. I fully intend to get you into Rome. But this has been an interesting journey, hasn't it, Paul? And so I want to tell you, everybody's going to be safe as long as everybody stays with everybody on the boat. Nobody leaves. Everybody will be safe, and you'll all get there. And then Paul says we need to eat. Need to have some energy. Obviously, they hadn't been eating. Probably been doing a lot of other things with that kind of rough sea. And so they hadn't eaten anything. And so he says, we're going to eat now. And he broke the bread. They ate. And they had some strength, and then they pushed on. Psalm 107, verses 25, 26, 27, 28 says this: He commands and raises the stormy wind, which lifts up the waves of the sea. They mount up to the heavens. They go down again to the depths. Their soul melts because of the trouble. They reel to and fro and stagger like a drunken man and are at their wits' end. Talking about sailors. Then they cry out to the Lord in their trouble, and He brings them out of their distresses. Let me suggest something to you. You've had some storms. You've never had this storm. You say, well, I've been out. I was in the Navy. Yeah, you was in a metal boat, not going down. This boat, in the winter, could have gone down easy. Paul teaches us to trust God through the storms in our hard journeys. You're going to have hard journeys. They're probably not going to be this hard. Already, this is harder than most of us have ever faced. 14 straight days of howling, cold, rainy wind with no hope. We need to learn to trust God through the shipwrecks. You see, this ship was destined to wreck. In fact, he was told that it would happen. They were going to run aground. And so guess what? Even though they'd lightened the ship as much as they could, when they got close, they could tell they were getting close to thing because they've been sounding. I don't know if you know anything about that with ropes. They do it by 6-foot lengths of rope, and they drop it down, and they could tell how deep they were, and they knew they were getting shallower and shallower. And so they put anchors out, 4 anchors trying to hold it where it was, but you can't stay there forever. So finally they pulled them up to let it drive, hoping it'd drive straight into the beach. Well, there's a bunch of stuff in the ocean around it, and they hit that, not the beach. And so on that, it began to be destroyed by the breakers. The breakers are breaking on the bow of the ship, and it's being destroyed. Some men said, we can't let our prisoners go free, so we must kill all of our prisoners. But the one guarding Paul, knowing that he had appealed to Caesar, that wasn't a good idea. We don't need to kill this man. It would get me in trouble. He's a Roman citizen and he's appealed to Rome. And so he convinced them not to kill any of them. So he said, some of you go on and you get on some pieces and get to the land. And so you won't let anybody get away. They'll come to you, and if they don't get to you, they're drowned anyway. So that's what they had. Everybody, 276 people got to shore safe. That's pretty neat, just like the angel said, huh? Just like the angel said. And no life was lost. Shipwrecks. 2 Corinthians 11, verse 25. Listen to what Paul said about shipwrecks. 3 times I was beaten with rods. I've never been beaten with rods one time. You ever been beaten? I've never even been hit with a rod. Well, that spanking don't count. 3 times I was beaten, because if that counts, I've been beaten a lot more than 3, okay? Okay. No, not because I was good, my folks were just wrong. 3 times I was beaten with rods, and once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. So this is the only account we've got. He shipwrecked 2 other times. And the other 2 times were much worse than this one. Why do I say that? Because it says, a night and a day I've been in the deep. Folks, I don't know, but if you're out there and there's no boat around, and you don't have a life preserver that's guaranteed, right? Think about that. It feels like water is uphill every direction you look. And only time you see something is when you're on the top of the wave and you don't see anything. And at night, when the sharks are out, what I'm trying to suggest to you is that you're going to have some shipwrecks. And they'll never be as scary as this. So what you complaining about? Third thing. Trust God through the snake bites. You know, it's one of those days, isn't it? You just think, it can't get any worse than this. Oh, yeah, it can. Don't you ever say that. It can't get any worse. Oh, yes. In verses 1 through 10 of Acts 28, by the way, that actually is wrong. It's Acts 28. It's raining and it's cold. But now the natives are really nice, but it's still raining and it's cold. So even if they gave them something to eat, we don't know what they really gave, but it's still raining and it's cold and they're on the beach. And that's a rough place to be, so they build a fire. And that's a tough thing to do right there. Build a fire when it's raining and it's cold. But they build a fire. While they're building the fire, Paul doesn't sit back and say, oh yeah, bring me the fire. He goes and does his part, picks up his stakes, his sticks, and a snake. About the time he's dropping his into the fire, latches onto his hands. All the natives that are there look at him and think, yeah, boy, God is after this guy. I mean, look at all that he must have killed a bunch of people or something. And God intends to kill this man. So he thinks he's gotten away, and now God's going to get him with a poisonous snake. Now remember, these people knew the snakes of their island. They'd have known if this was a nothing snake, right? People didn't just learn about snakes recently. They've known a long time. They see this snake, they see it latched onto his hand, and they think he's going to start swelling any minute, and then he'll be dead soon. But he doesn't swell. Snake's dead. Nothing happens. Now they start saying, this guy must be a god or something. Okay. This leads Paul to be able to perform some miracles on that island, which is wonderful. Amos 5, verse 19. It will be as though a man fled from a lion and a bear met him. Or as though he went into the house and leaned his hand on the wall and a serpent bit him. You ever had one of those days? It seemed like, well, the storm didn't get me, and it was bad. And then the shipwreck didn't get me, and it was bad. Now the snake, but didn't get him either. Because Mark 16, verse 18 said that they'd be able to take up serpents. This is the only record that we have of that, but they'd be able to take up serpents and they wouldn't die. They could even drink something deadly and it wouldn't kill them. Because if God didn't want you dead, guess what, folks? You're not going to die. So Paul teaches us in the middle of all that to trust God through the snake bites of our hard journeys. Think about his hard journey. There were storms, well, just one major one. There was a shipwreck and there was snake bites. Folks, I don't know. That sounds like a rough time. Here's something I want you to think about. Okay? Because that's a lot, right? That's a lot. Your life is a story. Your life is a story. And it's a real story. And it's a true story. Your life is a story. It's a real story and it's a true story. And by the way, it's written down already. Psalm 139:16. In your book, they are all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there was none of them. God already, He thinks your story is neat. And He's already written it down. I suspect that implies that not only are the stories real, but they're great stories and they're worth reading. And God's putting them in God's library, and you can go read the others maybe one day. Often what we thought was true in our life turned out to be a lie. But all these stories are real. How many times have you thought something was true and it turned out to be a lie? But, whatever you're talking about. You heard a lot of things. And then there's things you thought was a lie and they turned out to be true. In Chester, Illinois, you know who that is? Illinois, whatever. You know who that is? That's Popeye. That's the real Popeye. You thought that it was all make-believe, right? That they just invented that cartoon from nothing. But that's who they claim. His name was Frank Rocky Feigl. He lived from 1868 to 1947. I won't tell you his whole story. He's called Popeye because if you look at him really close, you'll notice that one of his eyes pop out because he was in so many different fights. So his story's real. And there was also an olive oil. Okay? Your story is real. What I'm trying to say is, your story is real. Now listen to me on that point. We watch movies, we like stories, we read books. You know what you like really good? It's when everything goes wrong. In fact, you don't even want to read or watch or listen to a story unless things go wrong. It's not an interesting story unless just about everything goes wrong. Who watches a story when everything goes right? That's for 3-year-olds. Grown-ups want everything to go wrong. We love a story when, against all odds, somehow, some way, things turn out right. Now, you remember that the next time something's going wrong in your life, because it is those wrong things that are going to make your story so wonderful forevermore. And you're going to remember those wrong things and how you still overcame them. Have your storms, your shipwrecks, and your snake bites made you better or made you bitter? What they doing to you? You haven't seen anything like this one little trip. You have not even seen this. And yet we think, where's God? Why hasn't God come through for me? We complain so bitterly about it. Things work out. Romans 8:28. All things work together for good. Things do work out. Listen to me. You say, it ain't working out in my life. It will. If it hasn't yet, it will. Because that's a promise. There are reasons for why it's happened. I don't see any reason in this. I don't have any reason in why these terrible things happen. I can't tell them to you what they are, but there are reasons. James 1, verse 3, knowing that the testing of your faith produces, there are reasons, and they're good ones. They're not silly. There's a daughter that complained one day to her father. He was a chef. And she complained that her life was just miserable. She's just a teenager. But her life was, all my life's just miserable. It'll never turn out right. And she just complained and complained and complained. Finally, he took her to the kitchen. He says, come with me. He drug her into the kitchen. He took 3 pots, same size, filled them with water, put them on the fire, and got them to boil. Took them about 20 minutes. After he got that, he then took some potatoes, and he put potatoes in one pot. In another pot, he put some eggs. In another pot, he put some coffee beans. And so he let them boil for a little while. When he got through boiling them for a little while, he said, daughter, what do you see? And she said, I see potatoes, eggs, and coffee. He said, no. Look closer. Touch the potatoes. And after she touched them, she noticed, well, they're a little soft now. She said, yeah. Now look at the eggs. She broke up, took the peeling off the egg and said, well, it's hard boiled. He said, yeah. And so then she sipped the coffee and the rich aroma, and a smile came on her face. And she said, what does this mean? said, well, the potatoes, the eggs, and the coffee beans each face the same adversity, the boiling water. However, each one reacted differently. Are you listening? The potato went in strong and hard, but the boiling water made it soft and weak. The egg was fragile, and it was put in the boiling water, but then it came out, and on the inside, it was hard. And the coffee beans were unique. After they were exposed to the boiling heat, they were changed, and they changed the water and created something new that was quite nice. The question is which one are you? When adversity knocks on your door, how do you respond? Are you a potato and you just go all jelly? Are you an egg and what's on the inside just gets hard? Are you a coffee bean and makes a beautiful aroma? Which one are you? Have your storms, your shipwrecks, your snake bites made you better, or have they made you bitter? Are you more certain or more in doubt about God through it? You should be more certain. Paul was. In fact, he didn't stop. He kept doing this work until later his head was taken from him. Hopefully, your storms, your shipwrecks, and your snake bites drive you to the shores of heaven. Amen. Where you really do believe. And maybe they've driven you here tonight, where maybe you would hear and believe and repent and confess Christ and even be baptized this very night. Or maybe it would drive you to repent and come back. Amen. It's your call, it's your decision, and how you react to your terrible storm, your terrible shipwreck, and your terrible, terrible snake bite. It's up to you. It's your choice. Will it make you bitter or better? If you need to come while we stand and while we sing.